The bass thrummed through my rib cage like a second heartbeat, each pulse syncing with the neon lights that painted the club in shades of electric blue and violent pink. I shouldn't have been there. I knew that the moment I'd crossed the velvet rope, my worn sneakers squeaking against marble floors that probably cost more than my yearly rent. But Jenna had insisted, her manicured nails digging into my arm as she dragged me past the bouncer who'd looked at me like I was something stuck to his shoe. "Loosen up, Claire," she'd shouted over the music, pressing a glass of something expensive and amber into my hand. "You work yourself to death at that diner. Live a little. Live a little." The words tasted bitter even as the alcohol burned its way down my throat. Living cost money I didn't have. Living meant not picking up double shifts to pay for community college classes I attended half asleep. Living meant forgetting that my mother's medical bills sat in a stack on my kitchen counter, red ink screaming at me every time I walked past. But the alcohol helped. God, it helped. The second drink dissolved the knot in my shoulders. The third made the pulsing crowd seem less suffocating, more like a warm embrace. By the fourth, I'd stopped counting, stopped caring, stopped being the invisible waitress who smiled while men's eyes slid past her like she was part of the furniture. The club, Obsidian they called it, was the kind of place where money whispered instead of shouted. Crystal chandeliers dripped from ceilings so high they disappeared into shadow. Women in dresses that cost more than my car draped themselves over men in tailored suits, and everyone moved with the easy confidence of people who'd never checked their bank balance before buying groceries. I didn't belong here. But tonight, wrapped in the cheap bodycon dress Jenna had lent me and floating on a cloud of expensive vodka, I could pretend. "I need air," I slurred to Jenna, who was wrapped around some banker type with salt and pepper hair. She waved me off without looking, and I stumbled toward what I hoped was an exit. The hallway was quieter, muffled. My heels, also Jenna's, half a size too small, clicked against the floor as I weaved past velvet curtains and closed doors. The walls here were deep burgundy, the lighting low and amber. It smelled different, too, not the cloying mix of perfume and sweat from the dance floor, but something cleaner. Expensive. Like cedar and something sharp I couldn't name. I pushed through a door, expecting to find a balcony or a fire escape. Instead, I stumbled into a private lounge. The room fell silent. 3 men in dark suits turned to look at me, their conversations dying mid-sentence. They stood near a bar made of black marble, glasses of whiskey catching the light. But they weren't what made my alcohol-soaked brain suddenly snap to attention. He sat in a leather chair that might as well have been a throne, one leg crossed over the other, a crystal tumbler balanced on his knee. The dim lighting carved shadows across a face that could have been chiseled from marble. Sharp jawline, high cheekbones, a mouth set in a line that suggested he rarely smiled, but it was his eyes that stopped me cold. Dark, almost black, they fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin prickle with something between fear and recognition. He wore all black. Black suit, black shirt with the top 2 buttons undone, black tie loosened just enough to seem deliberate. Even in my drunken haze, I could see the quality, the way the fabric fell, the subtle sheen of silk, the watch on his wrist that probably cost more than my mother's entire medical debt. Everything about him screamed danger, power, control. And I, drunk and stupid and so tired of being invisible, giggled. "Oops," I said, my voice too loud in the sudden quiet. "Wrong door." I should have left. Should have backed out immediately and found Jenna and gone home. But the alcohol had other ideas, and my traitorous feet carried me further into the room instead of out of it. "Nice setup," I said, gesturing vaguely at the opulent space. Very broody. Very bad boy in a leather jacket vibes, except with really expensive whiskey. One of the men, built like a tank, with a scar running down his cheek, took a step toward me. But the man in the chair raised one hand, barely a movement, and Tank Man froze. "Bad boy?" His voice was low, almost amused. It rolled over me like smoke, cultured and controlled with just a hint of something foreign in the vowels. "European, maybe. Is that what you think?" I should have heard the warning in his tone. Should have recognized the way the other men tensed. the way the air itself seemed to thicken. But I was drunk and reckless, and so goddamn tired of being afraid of everything. Yeah, I said, leaning against a side table for balance. The whole dark and mysterious thing. The private room. The scary bodyguards. I waved at the men, who looked like they wanted to throw me out a window. I'm dangerous. Stay away. Very attractive in a fictional sense. The corner of his mouth twitched. Fictional. Well, yeah. In real life, guys like you are usually just assholes with daddy issues and trust funds. The words spilled out before I could stop them, liquid courage making me bold and stupid. No offense. The room's temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Tankman looked like he might actually implode. But the man in the chair just studied me, his dark eyes moving over my face like he was reading something written there that only he could see. Then he stood. He moved like water, fluid and deliberate, and suddenly I realized how tall he was. 6'3", maybe 6'4". The suit did nothing to hide the breadth of his shoulders, the lean strength in the way he carried himself. He crossed the distance between us in 3 strides, and the smell hit me, cedar and gunpowder, and something clean and masculine that made my knees weak. "You're drunk," he said. It wasn't a question. Very observant, I looked up at him, my neck craning back. This close, I could see details. A thin scar through his left eyebrow, a tiny nick on his jaw from shaving, the way his pupils dilated slightly as he looked down at me. "And you're judgy. We all have our flaws. Judgy," he repeated, like he was tasting the word. Then so fast I didn't see it coming, his hand came up and gripped my chin. Not hard, not bruising, but firm enough that I couldn't look away. His thumb pressed against my lower lip, and I felt that touch everywhere, a spark that traveled down my spine and pooled low in my belly. "Let me clarify something," he said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. His face was inches from mine now, close enough that I could feel his breath against my skin. "I'm not a bad boy. Bad boys are children playing at rebellion, looking for attention." His grip tightened just slightly, his eyes boring into mine. "I'm something much worse." My heart slammed against my ribs. The alcohol haze was burning off fast, replaced by a clarity that made everything sharp and bright and terrifying. This wasn't a game. This wasn't some rich playboy at a club. The danger I'd sensed wasn't aesthetic. It was real, thrumming in the air between us like a live wire. My voice came out breathy, small. "I should go." "Yes," he agreed, but he didn't let go. His thumb traced my lower lip once, a touch so intimate and possessive that my breath caught. "You should." Then he released me, stepping back with the same fluid grace. He pulled a phone from his pocket, one of 3 I could see clipped to his belt, and said something low in a language I didn't recognize. One of the other men appeared at my elbow. Not Tankman, but someone younger, with kind eyes that didn't match the hardness of his jaw. "Marco will escort you to your friend," the man said, returning to his chair like I'd already ceased to exist. But just as I turned to leave, dizzy and confused, and feeling like I'd just survived something I didn't understand, his voice stopped me. "What's your name?" I shouldn't have answered. Every self-preservation instinct I had was screaming at me to run. But I turned back, and those dark eyes caught mine again, and I heard myself say, "Claire. Claire Morrison." He smiled then. It was a terrible smile, beautiful and cold and full of promise. "Claire Morrison," he repeated, like he was memorizing it. "Go home, Claire, sleep this off, and pray we don't meet again." The words felt like a curse and a blessing all at once. Marco, polite, silent Marco, guided me back through the maze of hallways, his hand barely touching my elbow, but somehow managing to keep me upright. Jenna was still on the dance floor, and I let Marco deposit me beside her before he disappeared like smoke. "Where did you go?" Jenna shouted, but her words were already fading, drowned out by the sudden rushing in my ears. I touched my lip where his thumb had been, and it burned. Somewhere behind me, in a room I'd stumbled into by accident, a man I didn't know now knew my name, and something in his smile told me that accident was about to become the worst mistake of my life. Or maybe, something whispered in the back of my mind. The beginning of something I wouldn't survive intact. The music pulsed, the lights flashed, and I felt his eyes on me even though I couldn't see him, watching, claiming, deciding my fate with the same calm control he'd used to touch my face. I should have run, but something told me it was already too late. I woke up to sunlight stabbing through my blinds like an accusation, and a headache that felt like my brain was trying to escape through my skull. The dress, Jenna's dress, was tangled around my waist, and my mouth tasted like I'd gargled with ashtray water. For a blessed few seconds, I didn't remember. Then it hit me. The club, the private room. Him, oh God. I whispered to my empty apartment, pressing my palms against my eyes. Oh God, oh God, oh God. What had I done? I'd walked into a private room in the most exclusive club in the city, insulted someone who was clearly important, and then, my stomach churned, I'd let him touch my face like he owned me. And the worst part, the part that made shame crawl up my throat, was that I'd liked it. My phone buzzed. 12 missed calls from Jenna and a text. Girl, where did you go? That guy who walked you back to me was hot. Details now. I typed back a quick lie about getting sick and calling an Uber, then dragged myself to the shower. The hot water did nothing to wash away the memory of his eyes, dark and knowing, or the way his voice had wrapped around my name like a promise. Pray we don't meet again. Fine by me. I never wanted to see that place or that man again. By noon, I was at Murray's diner, tying my apron and trying to ignore how my hands shook as I poured coffee. The breakfast rush was dying down, leaving behind the usual scattered locals and truckers passing through. Safe. Normal. My world. You look like death, Gary said from the kitchen window, his weathered face creasing with concern. He'd owned Murray's for 30 years, and he'd given me this job when I was 18 and desperate. You coming down with something? Just a late night, I said, forcing a smile. I'm fine. I wasn't fine. Every time the door chimed, my heart jumped. Every time I saw a black car pass by the window, my stomach clenched. It was ridiculous. Men like him didn't come to places like this. They lived in a different stratosphere, one I'd briefly touched before gravity yanked me back down to earth. By 3 o'clock, I'd almost convinced myself I was being paranoid. Then the door chimed, and everything stopped. 3 men walked in first. They weren't dressed for Murray's diner. Expensive suits, sharp eyes, the kind of coiled alertness that said they were always looking for threats. One of them was Tank Man from last night, the scar on his face catching the fluorescent light. They scanned the room with military precision, and when their eyes landed on me, I saw recognition. My coffee pot slipped, splashing hot liquid across the counter. Shit, I hissed, grabbing a rag, my hands shaking so badly I could barely clean it up. Then he walked in. In the harsh light of day, in my diner with its cracked vinyl booths and faded linoleum, he looked even more out of place. The suit today was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, with a black shirt underneath that probably cost more than my car. His hair was dark, pushed back from his face, and in the sunlight streaming through the windows, I could see hints of silver at his temples. He saw me immediately. Those dark eyes found mine across the diner, and a slow smile curved his mouth. The same terrible smile from last night. Every customer in the diner went quiet. Even Gary stopped clattering dishes. He walked toward me, his men flanking him, and I felt like prey watching a predator approach. My back hit the counter, and I realized I'd been backing away without meaning to. "Hello, Claire," he said, his voice carrying in the sudden silence. "We need to talk. I'm working." My voice came out thin, reedy. "You need to leave." "No." He pulled out a chair at the counter, my counter, where I'd served coffee to Mrs. Henderson every Tuesday for 4 years, and sat like he owned the place. Coffee. Black. His men positioned themselves by the door and the windows. Not threatening exactly, but making it very clear that no one was leaving until he decided they could. Gary emerged from the kitchen, his face pale. "Sir, I don't want any trouble." "There won't be any." The man didn't even look at him, his eyes fixed on me. "As long as Claire cooperates." My hand shook as I poured coffee, sloshing it into a mug. I set it in front of him too hard, liquid sloshing over the rim, and he smiled like I'd done something adorable. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the stool beside him. "I'm working," I repeated. "Gary." He finally looked away from me, toward my boss. "Give Claire the rest of the day off, paid, of course." He pulled out a wallet, black leather, thick with cards and cash, and dropped several $100 bills on the counter. "For your trouble." Gary looked at the money, then at me, then at the men blocking his exit. "Claire, honey, why don't you take your break?" Betrayal stung, but I couldn't blame him. Gary had a wife, grandkids. He wasn't going to risk them for me. I untied my apron with numb fingers and sat, leaving as much space between us as possible. "What do you want?" "Several things." He took a sip of coffee, and somehow made even that look elegant. "First, your full name. Claire Morrison, but Morrison from marriage or birth?" "Why does it matter?" "Answer the question." The command in his voice made me bristle. "Birth. I've never been married. Now leave me alone." "Second." He ignored my demand entirely. "Your address, your mother's current location, your class schedule at community college, and your work schedule here and at the dry cleaners on 5th Street. Ice flooded my veins. "How do you—" "I know everything about you, Claire." He set down the mug and turned to face me fully, and the intensity in his gaze made it hard to breathe. "I know your mother has stage 4 cancer and is currently at St. Mary's Hospice. I know you're 24 years old, dropped out of college twice to pay her medical bills, and work 70 hours a week between 3 jobs. I know you have $15 in your checking account, $60,000 in medical debt, and you haven't bought yourself anything new in 8 months. Tears burned my eyes. You had no right. I have every right." He leaned closer, his voice dropping. "Because last night, you walked into my private room. You looked at me, and laughed. You called me a bad boy and told me I had daddy issues." His smile was sharp enough to cut. "Do you have any idea how rare that is? How long it's been since anyone dared speak to me like that?" "I was drunk," I whispered. "I didn't know what? Who I am?" He tilted his head. "No, I don't suppose you did. Allow me to introduce myself properly. Alexei Volkov. And before you ask, yes, that Volkov." The name hit me like a physical blow. Even I knew that name. Everyone in the city knew that name, whispered in the same breath as words like organized crime and untouchable and dangerous. "Oh God," I breathed, "not God, though people do pray to me sometimes." He said it without humor, stating a fact. "Usually they're begging for their lives." I jerked back, my stool scraping against the floor. "Are you threatening me?" "No." He caught my wrist before I could bolt, his grip firm but not painful. "I'm explaining context, so you understand the position you're in." "I didn't do anything wrong," I said, hating how my voice shook. "I stumbled into the wrong room, that's it. I'm nobody. I'm not a threat to you." "No, you're not." His thumb traced circles on the inside of my wrist, right over my racing pulse. "You're something much more problematic." "What? Interesting." The word hung between us like a curse. "Last night you should have died," he continued conversationally, like we were discussing the weather. "Or at the very least, you should have been taught a lesson about respecting boundaries. Do you know what I did instead?" I shook my head, not trusting my voice. "I let you go. And then I couldn't stop thinking about you." His grip tightened just slightly. "About the way you looked at me like I was just a man. About how you tasted fear for only a moment before courage, or stupidity, took over. About how your pulse jumped under my thumb, just like it's doing now." "Please," I whispered. "I don't want any trouble. I'll forget I ever saw you. I'll never go back to that club. You'll do exactly what I tell you." He released my wrist and stood, pulling something from his pocket. A phone, sleek and new, still in its box. "This is yours now. It has one number programmed into it. Mine. You will answer when I call. You will go where I tell you to go. And in return, I will take care of your problems." He pulled out another piece of paper, A check, I realized, my vision blurring as I saw the amount, $60,000, the exact amount of my mother's medical debt. No, I said, shoving it back at him. No, I don't want your money. I don't want anything from you. It's not a request, Claire. He placed the check on the counter, then the phone beside it. Your mother will be transferred to a private facility today. The best oncologists, experimental treatments, whatever she needs. Your debt will be cleared. You'll quit your jobs. All of them. And you will be available when I need you. Need me for what? Horror was crawling up my spine. Ugly scenarios playing through my mind. He leaned down, his mouth close to my ear, and I could feel the heat of him, smell that cedar and gunpowder scent. That's the question, isn't it? I haven't decided yet, but you intrigue me, Claire Morrison. And I always acquire things that intrigue me. I'm not a thing, I bit out, finding a spark of anger through the fear. No. He straightened, and something flickered in his eyes. Approval, maybe, or amusement. You're not. Which is why this will be so much more interesting than I anticipated. He started toward the door, his men falling into formation around him. But he paused at the threshold, looking back over his shoulder. Oh, and Claire, don't try to run. I have people everywhere. Your apartment, your mother's hospice, even here. He smiled that terrible smile again. You're mine now. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be. Then he was gone, sliding into a black SUV with tinted windows that had been idling outside. The vehicle pulled away, and slowly, the diner came back to life. Customers whispering, Gary's face pale as he stared at the money still on the counter. I looked down at the check and the phone, my hands shaking so hard I had to grip the counter to stay upright. $60,000. My mother's life, spelled out in ink and numbers, and all it would cost me was my freedom. I picked up the phone with numb fingers and saw a text already waiting. Answer when I call, Claire. I don't like to be kept waiting. My gilded cage had just snapped shut, and I hadn't even heard the lock turn. Word count, 2,99, finalizado o bloco 2 com 2,99 palavras. A história avança para o dia seguinte. Mostra Alexei invadindo o mundo normal de Claire. Revela sua identidade como chefe da máfia. E estabelece a dinâmica de poder e possessividade. Termina com tensão sobre o que acontecerá em seguida. The phone rang at 2 a.m. I'd been staring at the ceiling of my apartment for hours, the check burning a hole in my nightstand drawer where I'd shoved it like hiding it would make this nightmare less real. I'd called my mother's hospice 3 times. They'd confirmed, voices careful and professional, that Mrs. Morrison had been transferred to Willow Heights, a private facility I'd only ever seen in magazines, the kind of place where dying felt less like an ending and more like a luxury retreat. We can't discuss who authorized the transfer, the nurse had said. But your mother is very comfortable. The doctors are optimistic about some new treatment options. Optimistic. For stage 4 cancer. Because of him. When the phone lit up, Alexei, no last name needed, my stomach dropped. I let it ring twice before answering. Hello? Did I wake you? His voice was smooth, unhurried, like calling in the middle of the night was perfectly normal. Yes, I lied. Another lie, Claire. I can practically hear you thinking from here. There was a smile in his voice. Get dressed. Something nice. A car will be there in 20 minutes. It's 2 a.m, I said, sitting up. I'm not going anywhere. Yes, you are. Unless you'd prefer I come up and dress you myself. I'm parked outside your building right now and I'm not a patient man. I scrambled to the window, yanking back the curtain. Sure enough, the black SUV idled at the curb, windows dark, exhaust puffing into the cold night air. My skin crawled with the knowledge that he could see my window, probably knew exactly which apartment was mine, had probably known for days before ever walking into the diner. Why? My voice cracked. What do you want? I want you to get dressed, Claire. The clock is ticking. He hung up. I stood there, frozen, clutching the phone. I could refuse, could lock my door, call the police, tell them I was being harassed by Alexei Volkov. And then what? The police couldn't touch him. Everyone knew that. And my mother would be transferred back to county hospice, back to dying slowly in a shared room with flickering lights and overwhelmed nurses, back to me working myself to death for treatments that only bought her weeks instead of months. 18 minutes later, I was in the back of the SUV. I'd chosen the only nice thing I owned, a simple black dress I'd bought for my high school graduation and had worn to every funeral and interview since. It was slightly too big now, hanging off shoulders that had gotten bonier over the past year. I'd tried with makeup, but my hands had shaken too badly, so I'd settled for mascara and lip gloss. The driver, not Marco, someone new with dead eyes and scarred knuckles, said nothing as we drove through the empty city streets. We headed away from downtown, toward the waterfront, where old warehouses had been converted into expensive lofts and exclusive restaurants. We stopped in front of a building with no sign, just a number in brass. The driver opened my door, and I stepped out into the cold, wrapping my thin coat tighter. "Top floor," he said. His first and only words to me. The elevator was all mirrors and soft lighting. I watched my reflection fracture and multiply as we rose, a scared girl playing dress-up, way out of her depth. The doors opened directly into a penthouse, and the space stole my breath. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the harbor, the city lights reflecting off black water like fallen stars. The furniture was all clean lines and expensive leather, art on the walls that I suspected was original, not prints. A fireplace crackled with real flames, and the whole space smelled like him, cedar and smoke and money. Alexei stood by the windows, hands in his pockets, silhouetted against the city. He'd changed since this afternoon, black slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, exposing forearms corded with muscle and marked with scars that looked like they had stories I didn't want to know. "You came," he said without turning around. Did I have a choice? No. He turned then, and even from across the room, his eyes found mine with that unsettling intensity. But I appreciate the illusion of cooperation. It makes this easier. Makes what easier? He crossed to a bar cart and poured 2 glasses of something amber. "Come here, Claire." It wasn't a request. I forced my feet to move, crossing the expanse of hardwood until I stood close enough to take the glass he offered. Our fingers brushed, and I jerked back like I'd been burned. He smiled. Still afraid of me. Shouldn't I be? Yes. He took a sip, watching me over the rim. But you're here anyway. That's either very brave or very stupid. I haven't decided which. You didn't leave me a choice, I repeated. My mother is receiving the best care money can buy, and will continue to, as long as you keep your end of our arrangement. What arrangement? You never actually explained what you want from me. He set down his glass and moved closer, and I had to fight the urge to back away. You really don't know, do you? How rare you are. I'm not rare. I'm a broke waitress with a sick mother. I'm the opposite of rare. I'm invisible. To them, maybe. His hand came up, and I flinched. But he just tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, the gesture almost tender. But not to me. When you walked into that room, drunk and fearless, do you know what I saw? I shook my head. Someone who didn't know to be afraid. Who looked at me like I was just a man, not Alexei Volkov, not the Pakhan, not someone to bow and scrape to. Just a man. His thumb traced my cheekbone. Do you understand how intoxicating that is? How dangerous? I don't understand any of this, I whispered. Why me? There are thousands of women in this city who would throw themselves at you. Beautiful women, educated women, who would see my money and power first, who would calculate angles and benefits before they even learned my name. His grip tightened just slightly. You didn't even know who I was. And when you found out, you were terrified, yes, but you still had fire in your eyes. Still told me no. And that's attractive to you? Someone saying no? It's novel. His mouth curved. Everyone says yes to me, Claire. Everyone. They say yes because they're paid to, or because they're afraid to do otherwise, or because they want something from me. But you? He leaned down until his forehead almost touched mine. You said no because you meant it. And I find I want to know what it takes to make you say yes. My heart hammered against my ribs. This is insane. You don't even know me. I know you work 3 jobs to pay for a mother who's dying anyway. I know you sacrifice everything for people who wouldn't do the same for you. I know you're loyal to a fault, brave when you shouldn't be, and so goddamn stubborn you'd rather drown than ask for help. His eyes searched mine. I know you better than you think. Knowing facts about me isn't the same as knowing me. No, he agreed, which is why you're here, so I can learn the rest. He stepped back and I could breathe again. He gestured to a dining table I hadn't noticed, set with white linens and covered dishes. Sit. Eat. You've lost weight you can't afford to lose. I'm not hungry. Sit anyway. I found myself obeying, hating how easily I'd fallen into the pattern. He sat across from me, and one of his men, I hadn't even seen him arrive, appeared to serve the food. Lobster, steak, vegetables that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. It smelled incredible, and my traitorous stomach growled. Eat! Alexei commanded again, his eyes never leaving my face. I picked up my fork. The food was perfect, melt in your mouth tender, but it tasted like ash. How long? I finally asked. How long what? How long do I have to do this? Play whatever game this is? He considered the question, cutting his steak with precise movements. That depends entirely on you, on whether I give you what you want, on whether you stop fighting the inevitable. He set down his silverware and leaned back, studying me. You think this is temporary, that eventually I'll lose interest and let you go back to your little life. But here's the truth, Claire. I don't lose interest. When I decide I want something, I keep it. I'm not a possession. Aren't you? He tilted his head. I own your mother's life. I own your apartment. Yes. I bought your building this afternoon. I own your debt, your future. Every breath you take from this moment forward, you can fight it. Make this difficult for both of us, or you can accept it and let me take care of you. Tears burned my eyes. This isn't taking care of me. This is ownership. Yes. No apology, no shame. But I take care of what's mine, Claire. Your mother will live longer and more comfortably than she ever would have otherwise. You'll never work another double shift. Never check your bank account in fear. Never go to bed hungry. All you have to do is stop fighting me. And if I can't? Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Then I'll break you down until you can. But I'd rather not. I like your fire. I just need to redirect it. He stood and offered his hand. Come. I want to show you something. Every instinct screamed at me to refuse. But I took his hand, warm, calloused, surprisingly gentle, and let him lead me to the windows. Look, he said, standing behind me, his chest against my back. What do you see? The city. My city. His arms came around me, caging me in, his chin resting on top of my head. Every light down there represents something I control. Businesses, politicians, police. I built an empire from nothing, Claire, clawed my way up from streets that would have killed a weaker man, and now I stand here, and the city bends to my will. Then why do you need me? My voice was small, defeated. You have everything. Not everything. His arms tightened. I have power, money, respect, but I don't have something soft to come home to. Something pure that hasn't been corrupted by my world. Something that looks at me and sees a man, not a monster. But you are a monster, I whispered. He laughed, and I felt it rumble through his chest. Yes. But monsters need something to protect, don't they? Something to fight for beyond territory and money. And you, Claire Morrison, with your selfless heart and stubborn pride, you'll be mine to protect. I don't want to be protected. I want to be free. Same thing with me. His lips brushed my temple. In my world, freedom without protection is just a pretty word for dead. You'll understand eventually. We stood there, wrapped in darkness and city lights, and I felt the cage close tighter. He was warm against my back, solid and real, and I hated how a tiny part of me, a part I didn't want to acknowledge, felt safe despite everything. Take me home, I said finally. This is your home now. Alexei. But, he interrupted, I'm not unreasonable. You can go back to your apartment tonight. Collect your things tomorrow. By tomorrow night, you'll move here. No. His hand caught my chin, turning my face toward him. Yes, Claire. Stop saying no when we both know it's inevitable. He kissed me. It wasn't gentle. It was claiming, possessive, his mouth demanding submission even as I tried to pull away. But his arm was iron around my waist, and his other hand buried in my hair, holding me exactly where he wanted me. And God help me, after a moment of resistance, my body betrayed me. softening, melting, kissing him back with a desperate hunger I didn't know I possessed. When he finally pulled away, we were both breathing hard, and his eyes were black with want. "Tomorrow night," he said again. "Don't make me come get you." The driver took me home in silence, and I sat in the back seat with my lips still burning, tasting cedar and smoke and my own surrender. I didn't sleep. How could I? With the taste of him still on my lips, and the weight of his ultimatum pressing down on my chest like a stone. I sat on my threadbare couch as dawn broke through my window, painting my tiny apartment in shades of gray and gold, and tried to figure out how my life had derailed so completely in 48 hours. My phone, his phone, sat on the coffee table, silent and accusatory. I'd stared at it for hours, imagining throwing it out the window, smashing it, making some grand gesture of defiance. But my mother's face kept appearing in my mind, the way she'd looked last month, gray and hollow, her hand so thin in mine. And then yesterday, when I'd finally worked up the courage to visit Willow Heights, the private room with the view, the attentive nurses, the way she'd smiled without pain for the first time in months. "They say I might have more time," she'd whispered, squeezing my hand. "Real time, Claire. Maybe even a year. How did you manage this?" I'd lied. Said I'd gotten a better job, a benefactor, anything but the truth. That I'd been bought. That her life had been purchased with my freedom by a man whose touch still burned on my skin. At 9 a.m., there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Marco, kind-eyed Marco from the club, holding garment bags and boxes. Behind him, 2 other men carried suitcases. "Mr. Volkov thought you might need help packing," Marco said, his voice carefully neutral. "And he sent some things for you." "I haven't agreed to move," I said, but my protest sounded weak even to my ears. Marco's expression turned sympathetic. "Miss Morrison, I've worked for Mr. Volkov for 8 years. In that time, I've never seen him change his mind once it's made up. You can make this easy or hard, but the outcome will be the same." I let them in because what choice did I have? They were professional, efficient, packing up my meager belongings with more care than they deserved. Meanwhile, I opened the garment bags with shaking hands. Dresses, designer dresses in my exact size. How did he know my size? In rich fabrics and jewel tones. Shoes that looked like art. Lingerie that made me flush just looking at it. Delicate lace and silk in blacks and creams and deep burgundy. "He has excellent taste," Marco offered, seeing my expression. "He has control issues," I corrected. Marco almost smiled. That too. By noon, my entire life was packed into 6 boxes. 6 boxes to show for 24 years of existence. The apartment I'd lived in for 3 years was empty, echoing, already feeling like it belonged to someone else. "The lease has been terminated," Marco informed me. "And your deposit refunded, plus compensation for early termination." "Of course it has," I said hollowly. The drive to Alexei's building, my new home, I couldn't even think it without tasting bile, took 20 minutes. Long enough for panic to claw at my throat, short enough that I couldn't talk myself into jumping out at a red light. The penthouse in daylight was even more intimidating. Floor-to-ceiling windows flooded the space with light, making everything sharp and exposed. No shadows to hide in, no darkness to soften edges. "Mr. Volkov is in a meeting," Marco said, leading me down a hallway I hadn't seen last night. "He'll be back this evening. This is your room." He opened a door, and I stepped into a space 3 times the size of my entire apartment. The bed was enormous, draped in white linens that probably cost more than my car. A sitting area with a chaise lounge faced more windows overlooking the harbor. There were fresh flowers on the dresser. Peonies, delicate and pink. "Your bathroom is through there," Marco gestured. "And your closet. Mr. Volkov had it stocked, but if you need anything else, just let me or any of the staff know." "Staff?" I echoed weakly. "There's a housekeeper, a chef and security, of course. Mr. Volkov values privacy and safety above all else." Marco's expression turned serious. "Miss Morrison, I know this is overwhelming, but Mr. Volkov, he doesn't do this." Bring someone into his home, I mean. In all my time with him, you're the first. Lucky me, I muttered. After Marco left, I explored my gilded cage. The closet was a room unto itself, already filled with more clothes than I could wear in a year. The bathroom had heated floors, a shower with 6 jets, and a bathtub deep enough to drown in. Everything was perfect, expensive, beautiful. And none of it was mine. Not really. I found myself back at the windows, staring out at the city. From up here, people looked like ants, their problems tiny and insignificant. Is this how Alexei saw the world? From above, everyone small and controllable. You didn't run. I spun. Alexei stood in the doorway, still in his suit, tie loosened. I hadn't heard him come in. How long had he been watching me? Marco said you were in a meeting. I was. I cut it short. He crossed the room with that predatory grace, stopping close enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes. I half expected to get a call that you'd tried to escape. Where would I go? The bitterness in my voice was sharp enough to cut. You own everything. My mother, my apartment, my debt. You've made sure I have nowhere to run. Yes, he agreed without shame. Then his hand came up, cupping my face with a gentleness that didn't match his words. But you're here anyway. Why? Because you gave me no choice. There's always a choice, Claire. You could have refused, tried to disappear, find a way to fight me. But you didn't. His thumb traced my lower lip, the gesture now familiar and terrifying. Why? I wanted to lie, to throw his arrogance back in his face. But standing there with his dark eyes boring into mine, I found I couldn't. My mother, I whispered. She has a chance now. A real chance. I can't take that away from her, so you'll sacrifice yourself instead. Something flickered in his expression, approval mixed with something darker. Such loyalty, such devotion. Do you know what I would have done at your age for someone who loved me like that? What? Anything. The word was heavy with old ghosts. Everything. I would have burned the world down. His hand slid to the back of my neck, holding me in place. But no one did. Love me like that, I mean. Everyone who claimed to either wanted something or feared me. Usually both. And I'm different? I challenged, finding some spark of courage. I'm here because I'm terrified of you. Because you manipulated me with my mother's life. That's not love, Alexei. That's coercion. I know. He leaned down until his forehead touched mine. But it's a start. Fear can become something else, given time. And I have nothing but time to spend on you. This is insane, I breathed. You can't force someone to care about you, can I? His smile was sharp. I can force proximity, force you to see me, not the monster everyone else sees. Force you to accept comfort and safety and everything you've been denying yourself for years. And eventually, Claire, you'll stop fighting. You'll realize that this cage I've put you in is more freedom than you've ever had. That's not freedom. That's Stockholm Syndrome. Call it what you want. He pulled back slightly, his hands dropping to my shoulders. But tell me, when was the last time you slept through the night? When did you last eat a meal without counting the cost? When did you do anything just because you wanted to, not because you had to? I couldn't answer. Couldn't remember. That's what I thought. His voice softened just slightly. I'm not a good man, Claire. I've done things that would make you sick if you knew. But I take care of what's mine. And you're mine now, whether you accept it or not. Before I could respond, his phone rang. One of 3 clipped to his belt. He answered in Russian, his voice sharp and commanding, completely different from how he'd just spoken to me. He listened, his jaw tightening, and I saw the shift. The man becoming the monster. Deal with it, he snapped, then switched to English. No witnesses. Clean it up before morning. He hung up and turned back to me, and it was jarring how quickly his expression smoothed. I have to go out. There's a situation that needs my attention. What kind of situation? I asked, then immediately wished I hadn't. His smile was cold. The kind you don't want to know about. Stay here. Don't leave the penthouse. Marco will be outside if you need anything. So I'm a prisoner. You're protected, he corrected. There are people who would hurt you to get to me. Until I've made it clear you're untouchable. You don't leave without me or my security. He started toward the door, then paused, looking back. Oh, and Claire, there's a dress in your closet. Black, long. Wear it tonight. We have a dinner to attend. I'm not going to Yes, you are. His voice turned hard. You'll smile, you'll stay by my side, and you'll show everyone that you belong to me. This isn't negotiable. Then he was gone, and I was alone in my beautiful prison. I found the dress. Of course it was perfect. A black silk gown that would cling to every curve, elegant and sophisticated, and completely unlike anything I'd ever worn. There was jewelry, too, in a box on the dresser, a necklace of diamonds that probably cost more than my mother's house. I tried the door to the hallway, locked from the outside. I tried the windows. They didn't open. I was well and truly trapped. Hours passed. I showered, using products that smelled like jasmine and vanilla. I dried my hair, applied the makeup from the vanity that had appeared while I'd been in the bathroom. I put on the dress, the jewelry, the heels that made my legs look miles long. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't recognize myself. This woman was elegant, expensive, someone who belonged in Alexei's world. Not Claire Morrison, the waitress who'd lived on ramen and hope. When Alexei returned at 7, blood on his cuff that he'd tried to wash off, he stopped dead at the sight of me. Bože moi, he breathed. You're stunning. I'm dressed up like a doll, I corrected. My doll. He crossed to me, taking my hand and spinning me slowly. Mine to dress, mine to protect, mine to show off. His eyes were hot, possessive. Every man at that dinner will want you, and every one of them will know they can't have you, that you're mine. He kissed me then, hard and claiming, tasting like whiskey and danger. And when he pulled back, leaving me breathless and flushed, he smiled. Let's go show them who you belong to. The car ride was silent, Alexei's hand possessive on my thigh. We pulled up to a restaurant I'd seen featured in magazines, Luminance, where reservations took months and entrees cost hundreds. But we didn't go to the main entrance. We were led through a private door, up an elevator, into a room where danger wore expensive suits and women glittered with jewels and secrets. Alexei's hand found the small of my back, guiding me into the lion's den. Gentlemen, he announced, his voice carrying, I'd like you to meet Claire, my Claire. And just like that, I became property in front of an audience. The dinner was a blur of faces and false smiles, of men whose eyes lingered too long and women whose gazes were pure calculation. Alexei kept me close, his hand always touching me, my back, my hand, my knee under the table, claiming me over and over with casual possessiveness. So tell me, Claire, one man said, Dmitri, someone important in Alexei's organization, how did you capture our Pakon's attention? He's famously unattached. I called him a bad boy, I said before I could stop myself. The table went silent. Then Alexei laughed, a real laugh, warm and surprised, and pulled me closer. And I told her she had no idea, he finished, kissing my temple. But she's learning. The message was clear. I was his, untouchable, under his protection and his control. And as the night wore on, I felt myself slipping further into the role, smiling at his side, accepting his touches, playing the part of the willing captive. Because what choice did I have? When we finally returned to the penthouse, I was exhausted, emotionally, physically, completely drained. You did well tonight, Alexei said, removing his jacket. They'll think twice before approaching you now. Is that what this was? Marking territory? Yes. He turned to face me, starting to loosen his tie. In my world, showing weakness gets you killed. You're my weakness now, Claire, so I have to make you my strength instead. Make it clear that touching you means war. I never asked to be your weakness. No. You just stumbled into my room, drunk and beautiful, and completely unaware of what you were starting. He crossed to me, backing me up until my legs hit the bed, but here we are. And now we both have to live with the consequences. His hand cupped my face, and I saw something in his eyes, want mixed with something softer, more dangerous. Tell me to stop, he whispered, his thumb tracing my lower lip. Tell me you don't feel this thing between us, and I'll walk away. Sleep in another room. Give you space. I should have said it. Should have told him to leave, to give me time. Anything to slow this freight train we were on. But I couldn't. Because despite everything, the fear, the coercion, the cage he'd locked me in, I did feel it. That pull, electric and terrifying, that made my skin burn where he touched me. So I said nothing, and Alexei smiled like I'd just given him the world. He kissed me like he was claiming something he'd already owned, his mouth demanding and sure. My hands fisted in his shirt, torn between pushing him away and pulling him closer, and my body made the choice for me, arching into him, surrendering to the heat that had been building between us since that first night in the club. Claire. He breathed against my lips, and hearing my name in his voice like that, reverent, desperate, undid something in me. We fell onto the bed in a tangle of silk and desperation, and for those hours, I let myself forget. Forget the cage. Forget the coercion. Forget everything except the way he touched me like I was something precious and breakable and his. When I woke in the early morning light, wrapped in Egyptian cotton sheets in Alexei's arms, reality came crashing back. What had I done? I'd slept with my captor, let him touch me, claim me, mark me as his in the most fundamental way, and God help me, I'd wanted it, had begged for it, my voice breaking on his name as he'd taken me apart piece by piece. Stop thinking so loud, Alexei murmured, his voice rough with sleep. His arm tightened around my waist, pulling me back against his chest. I can hear your regret from here. I should regret it, I whispered. But you don't. Not really. His lips found the curve of my shoulder, gentle. You're angry that you don't regret it. That's different. He was right, and I hated him for it. What happens now? I asked. Now? He rolled me to face him, and in the soft morning light, he looked younger, less dangerous, almost human. Now you stop fighting the inevitable. Accept that you're mine. Let me take care of you the way you deserve. By keeping me prisoner, by keeping you safe. His hand traced down my spine. There are things happening, Claire. Movements in my organization, challenges to my authority. Having you here, making it clear you're under my protection. It's not just about possession. It's about keeping you alive. Fear spiked through me. What kind of things? Nothing you need to worry about, but his expression had hardened, the man becoming the monster again. I'll handle it. The next few weeks fell into a strange routine. Alexei would leave early, dealing with business I didn't want to understand. I'd spend my days in the penthouse, reading, learning to navigate my new life. My mother's condition improved steadily. She'd gained weight, had color in her cheeks again, talked about maybe seeing next Christmas. And at night, Alexei would come home to me. We'd have dinner. Sometimes he'd cook, surprisingly domestic as he moved around the kitchen with the same precision he brought to everything. We'd talk, carefully avoiding topics like my freedom or his business. And then he'd take me to bed, and I'd let myself pretend this was normal, that I was here by choice. But the illusion shattered 3 weeks after I'd moved in. I woke to voices, angry, sharp Russian from the living room. Alexei's voice, cold with fury, and another man's, defensive and afraid. I pulled on a robe and crept to the doorway. Alexei had someone on their knees in front of him. Marco and 2 other guards stood nearby, weapons drawn. The man on his knees was young, maybe 25, bleeding from a cut above his eye. You stole from me, Alexei said, his voice conversational. $300,000, moved through accounts you thought I wouldn't notice. Pakan, please, I can explain. I don't want explanations. I want you to understand what happens when you betray me. Alexei pulled a gun from his waistband, and my heart stopped. Alexei, no, I gasped, stepping into the room before I could think better of it. Everyone froze. Alexei's head snapped toward me, his expression darkening. Get back in the bedroom, Claire. You can't just kill him. Yes, I can. His voice was ice. This is my world, my rules, and thieves get 1 warning. He turned back to the man. You're lucky I'm in a good mood. You get to keep your life, but your brother's debt? Tripled. And you work for me until it's paid. Understood? The man nodded frantically, and Marco hauled him up, dragging him toward the elevator. When they were gone, Alexei turned to me, and I saw the monster clearly for the first time. Not the man who cooked me dinner or held me at night, but the Pakan who ruled through fear and violence. "Never interfere with my business again," he said quietly. "Never." "You were going to kill him?" I whispered. "Maybe. Maybe not. But you don't question me in front of my men, Claire. You don't show weakness or doubt. Do you understand what you just did? You made me look soft. Good. Maybe you should be soft sometimes instead of—" He was across the room in 2 strides, his hand gripping my jaw. "Listen to me very carefully. That man stole from me. In my world, that's a death sentence. I showed mercy because of you, because I'm trying to be better when you're watching. But there are others who won't see it that way, who will think I'm weak, that they can challenge me, and when they do, people die. My people. Maybe even you." Tears burned my eyes. "What you'll always be. I can't do this." His grip softened, his thumb wiping away a tear. "Yes, you can. Because you're stronger than you think, and because you know I'd burn this city to ash before I let anything happen to you." "That doesn't make it better, Alexei. That makes it worse." He pulled me against his chest, and I hated how I melted into him. How even now, terrified and disgusted, my body sought his comfort. "I know," he whispered into my hair. "I know, Malaya. But it's what I have to give you. Violence wrapped in protection. Danger disguised as safety. And you'll learn to accept it because the alternative is going back to that life where you worked yourself to death, and your mother died slowly in a county hospice." He was right. God help me, he was right. The weeks turned into months. I learned the rules of Alexei's world. Never ask about business. Never show fear in front of his men. Never leave the penthouse without Marco or Alexei himself. My mother continued to improve, even started talking about remission. My old life faded like a dream, and slowly, terrifyingly, I stopped wanting to leave. It happened in increments, the way Alexei would text me during the day, "Thinking of you, stay safe," and my heart would flutter. The way he'd come home exhausted and dangerous, and I'd wait up for him anyway, needing to know he was okay. The way he'd hold me at night like I was the only real thing in his world of shadows and lies. I was falling for my captor, Stockholm Syndrome in its purest form. But it was more than that, because Alexei was falling too. I saw it in the way he'd cancel meetings to eat breakfast with me, the way he'd ask about my day like it mattered, like my small world of books and calls to my mother was as important as his empire, the way he'd touch me, not just with possession anymore, but with tenderness that seemed to surprise him as much as it did me. "You've ruined me," he told me one night, holding me in the dark. "I used to be focused, controlled. Now I spend half my time thinking about you, worrying about you, planning ways to make you smile." "Is that so terrible?" I whispered. "It's dangerous. Love makes you weak." My heart stopped. "Love?" He was quiet for a long moment. "What else would you call it? This obsession, this need to have you close, to know you're safe, to see you happy. I've killed men for less loyalty than you show your mother. I've destroyed lives for looking at me wrong. But you?" His hand found mine in the dark. "You looked at me like I was just a man. And I've been trying to be that man ever since." Tears slipped down my cheeks. "I can't love you. You took away my choice. I know." His voice was rough. "But I'm hoping that maybe, eventually, you'll choose me anyway. Not because you have to, but because you want to. That's not how this works, Alexei. Then we'll make new rules." He pulled me closer. "I can't let you go, Claire. I'm too selfish, too obsessed. But I can give you everything else. Freedom within these walls. Anything you want. Just stay." Where would I go? The words came out broken. "You're right. You've given me everything. My mother's alive. I don't have to work myself to death. I sleep through the night. I'm safe. But I'm also a prisoner who's starting to love her cage. And I don't know which is worse. Love me instead," he whispered. "Love me. And I promise I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret it." It should have been manipulation, should have been another way to control me. But in his voice, I heard the truth. The desperation of a man who'd built an empire but never had anything real. Who'd lived his whole life with people fearing or using him, never just choosing him. I'm afraid, I admitted. Good. So am I. He kissed my forehead. But we'll be afraid together. The change came 6 months after I'd moved in. Alexei came home early, his expression tight with something between anger and excitement. Pack a bag, he said. We're leaving for a week. Where? My house in the mountains. There's been chatter. Threats against me, which means threats against you. I need you somewhere secure while I deal with it. The mountain house was more fortress than home. High walls, security everywhere, isolated from everything. But it was also beautiful, all stone and wood and windows overlooking endless forest. And it was there, away from the city and his empire, that I finally saw all of Alexei. He cooked breakfast in a worn t-shirt and jeans, looking almost normal. We hiked through the woods, his hand in mine, talking about everything and nothing. He told me about his childhood in Russia, the poverty, the violence, how he'd clawed his way out. I told him about my dreams, silly things like owning a bookstore, traveling, having time to just be. I could give you that, he said. The bookstore. We could set it up in the city, staff it, whatever you want. I don't want you to buy me things, I said. I want... What? I want you to be happy without needing to control everything. I want to stay because I choose to, not because you've made it impossible to leave. I want this, I gestured between us, to be real. He stopped walking, turning to face me. It is real, Claire. The most real thing I've ever had. His hands cupped my face. You want choice? Here it is. I'm giving you one, right now. You can leave. I'll set you up somewhere safe, make sure your mother's care continues, give you money to start over. No strings, no conditions, or you can stay, and we build this thing between us into something that isn't about cages and coercion anymore. My heart hammered. You'd really let me go? It would kill me. But yes. His voice was raw. Because you're right. I can't force you to love me. And holding you prisoner isn't the same as having you choose to stay. I looked at him. This dangerous, damaged man who'd upended my life, who'd taken away my freedom and given me safety, who'd scared me and protected me and shown me what it meant to be someone's entire world. If I stay, I said slowly, things change. No more locked doors, no more guards following me everywhere. I need freedom, Alexei. Real freedom. Even if it scares you. Done. No hesitation. And you have to talk to me. About your business, about the dangers, about everything. No more protecting me by keeping me in the dark. Done. And you have to trust me. Trust that I won't run, that I'm choosing this, choosing you. His hand shook slightly against my face. That's the hardest one. But yes. Done. I took a deep breath. Then I'm staying. Not because I have to, because I want to. The kiss was different this time, not claiming or possessive, but grateful, relieved. Like he'd been holding his breath for months and could finally breathe. I love you, he said against my lips. I know I've done everything wrong, handled this all wrong, but I love you, Claire. And I'll spend the rest of my life proving I can be worthy of you choosing me. I love you too, I whispered, and felt the truth of it in my bones. God help me. I love you too. We stayed in the mountains for a week, and when we returned to the city, something had shifted. The cage was still there, his security, his need to protect me, his world of danger and violence. But the lock was gone. Alexei kept his promises. I could leave the penthouse when I wanted, go where I chose. He talked to me about his business, the threats, the challenges. And slowly, carefully, we built something real from the wreckage of how we'd started. My mother went into remission 6 months later. She cried when she saw me at Alexei's side, and later, in private, she asked, "Are you happy?" I thought about it, really thought about it. About the girl who'd stumbled drunk into a room and called a Mafia boss a bad boy, about everything that had happened since. The fear and coercion and slow, terrifying fall into love with someone impossible. Yes, I said finally. I really am. Because sometimes the cage becomes home. Sometimes the monster becomes the man. And sometimes when you stop fighting the inevitable, you find that freedom isn't about leaving. It's about choosing to stay. Alexei found me by the windows that night, looking out at the city lights. "What are you thinking?" he asked, pulling me back against his chest. "That you were right," I admitted. "That night at the club when I called you a bad boy and you said I had no idea." "And now?" "Now I know. You're not a bad boy. You're dangerous and possessive and way too overprotective." I turned in his arms, looking up at him. "But you're also mine, and I'm choosing you every day, even when it's hard." His smile was brilliant, rare, real. "Every day?" "Every day," I promised. And as he kissed me, the city spreading out below us like a kingdom we ruled together, I realized that sometimes the worst mistakes become the best decisions. That sometimes the man who takes away your choice gives you back something better. A life you never knew you wanted, filled with danger and passion, and a love so fierce it could burn down the world. I'd drunkenly called the Mafia boss a bad boy. He'd pulled me in and whispered that I had no idea, and he'd been right. I'd had no idea what I was starting, no idea where that moment would lead, but standing in his arms, with my mother alive, and my future bright, and my heart finally, impossibly full, I wouldn't change a single moment. Even the cage had become my choice, and that made all the difference.